And thank each of you for your efforts. This goes back across 3 different presidents' administrations, so we recognize that. I'll put that in perspective. But I come from a world where I can't relate to this conversation. I apologize, but I just don't understand, with a mandate from Congress, why we're here 20 years later having this conversation. Now, many of you weren't in your current job, so that's a parenthetical comment. But when Secretary Johnson was here, I believe it was before this committee last April, I particularly asked him, I said, do you have this report and this data? He says, I've seen a preliminary report, but he didn't believe in the, as I believe he called, preliminary report that lacked fidelity. It's almost a year later. I give him high marks for now giving us the report. My question today, and I don't know who would be best to respond to this, but how confident are we in this data? Why now is it more credible than it was a year ago? What happened in the intervening period of time? And how was the data collected? What efficacy does the data collection process have, so that next year and the next year, when we're looking at this evaluating progress, we can have some confidence? Who would be best to answer that?
I will, Senator.
Commissioner, thank you.
We have high confidence in that report that was issued for 2015.
What was the problem a year ago,
The problem in 2014, we had 2 major carriers that were transmitting manifests to us. They have to transmit an initial manifest to us. Then once the flight leaves, they have to tell us who actually boarded. And those closeout messages, those on-board messages, were faulty. So they were not reporting people as left. So we had extremely high overstay rates of people who flew on those carriers because we hadn't checked them off as leaving.
So the manifests weren't accurate? Is that what?
They were accurate in the name. They weren't accurate in who actually departed. So what happened is they carried people from all the visa waiver countries and a host of visa countries as well, and it skewed the data because these were 2 major carriers, so it skewed every country's data in 2014. We corrected that, and you see the numbers in 2015, and that's been corrected. We have very high confidence in that information that we've presented. Now, we're running that handheld pilot to help us validate what our assumptions are.
I understand that. So this was in 14 and 15. If we go back 10 years, were any of you, were we not collecting data then?
We were collecting data, but we had additional problems beyond that about the accuracy. The inbound data has always been accurate. We've been collecting the airline inbound manifest since 1988, I think. And after September 11th, we made that mandatory.
Okay.
We validate each and every person when we read that passport.
Right.
What we do is score the airlines, and they get fined if it's inaccurate.
Okay.
We don't do it for departure, though.
Director Healy, I think you're the proper person to direct this question. How many? We've got estimate. This report said about a little less than 500,000 in 15. About 1% overstayed their visa. Roughly last year, how many did we deport? Did we locate and remove from the country? Roughly, directionally.
Last year, overstay, just overstay removal, sir?
Yes, sir. Of the 500, if I'm trying to correlate the 2 numbers, and I realize that that's 1 year. There are many years. I've seen estimates as high as 40% of the total illegal immigrants that are here came in and overstayed a visa. I understand you don't have accurate numbers on that today.
Correct. That's correct.
But directionally, is that fairly correct that roughly?
I'd have to get back to you on that, sir.
Would you?
Because there is a distinction in my numbers and CBP's numbers.
Okay, that's where I'm going, because I see conflicting data about what estimates we have for that. What I'm really trying to get at is, of the people that we've identified, how many are we really actually then identifying and removing?
We're, in terms of that 971,000 number, sir, that I gave out, after it goes through the entire vetting and after we account for people changing their status or people departing the country, about 1% gets turned around, about roughly 10,000 gets sent out as criminal investigations to the field. So for FY15, sir, which is just the snapshot that I alluded to earlier, so roughly we have about 3,000 that are still under investigation right now. 1,626 leads have been what we call exhausted, meaning that we haven't been able to locate the individual. It comes back to us and it goes into a continuous monitoring status.
Right, just so let me put that in perspective. So let me get it right. So 3,000 were investigated.
Are under investigation right now.
Right, but those 3,000 could have come in any one of the years in the last 20 years, correct?
That's correct, sir.
All right, so my question is, if it's 40% of whatever that top number, we got 4, 5, 6 million people here who overstayed their visa. Directionally, that's fairly correct.
Yeah.
And last year, we identified and investigated 3,000. So you can kind of see where I'm going here.
Yes, sir, and
We have a monumental, you have, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I mean, it's your profession, but I mean, we have a monumental issue here. Even if we were to put biometric in and exit and have all the 100% accurate information on exit, we've got this huge built-up issue.
Yeah.
So am I directionally correct? I'm not trying to draw a conclusion, but I am trying to get
No,
information.
you're correct,
Right.
sir, and we can get back to you with more numbers, but one of the issues for us from the enforcement side in terms of biometrics, let's say you come across an individual, sir, who is not completely identified. You have pieces of information. Say he's got 7 aliases. Right now, our analysts have to take that time to go through all of that, whereas if we have the biometrics, we're going to be able to cut right to the chase. A fingerprint's a fingerprint.
Thank you. That really clarifies. Let me ask a question then of Director Gamble then. I know you've got several of these pilots out there. Can you talk about what's promising, what's not promising? And I know you have one at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta, as a matter of fact. But I've gone around, I've traveled a lot in the last 15 years. You know, a lot of these other countries, surprisingly, some of these countries would surprise us, have been doing this for a number of years. So I'd love to see us catch up on that. My question is what's promising right now in these programs and what are we discarding? But basically focus on what's encouraging that we might be able to do this to, as Director Healy said, make this system more efficient in terms of cleaning up what has built up over the years.
So, Senator, from GAO's perspective, we actually will be starting work shortly for this subcommittee to review where DHS is currently in their planning
And when
efforts
will
for
that-
biometric
when will that come
exit.
out?
We are starting that work shortly at the request of the chairman.
But as I understand it, this program's been in Atlanta for a while, right?
And so in terms of what benefits are being realized from the pilots currently, we don't have up-to-date information on that. Mr. Wagner may be able to speak to that since it's his office that's running the pilots. But it is an important question in terms of what are we really getting out of the pilots and to what extent CBP has metrics in place to kind of assess the performance and effectiveness of those pilots. And that's an important piece of it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm out of my time, but Commissioner, would you like to add to that?
Is this the handheld pilot that we're
Yes,
doing
sir.
in Atlanta?
Yeah.
Right, so that's
Particularly in Atlanta.
right. So that's allowing us to verify the accuracy of those
I
manifests.
know, what's
Right.
the conclusion? Are you moving, is it favorable at this point?
It's absolutely favorable. It's just a question that's a very expensive way to do it, a very manual way to do biometric exit, but it would work.
Well, that tells me it's not going to work.
It'll work at small and mid-sized airports, not at an Atlanta Hartsfield.
So on an Atlanta, that's where I'm going.
Right.
Chicago, Atlanta airports, these bigger airports, what's the idea now? What are we now investigating? What pilots are out there that might work in those bigger airports?
It's looking at the other biometrics, things that we can collect in a quick and reliable manner.
And for what period of time can we expect to get at that? And I'm really out of time.
We plan to launch another field trial later this calendar year to be able to start to measure exactly that.
And you would want, a year's information or evidence out of that?
Yes.
So sometime around this time next year, would DHS, you think, be in a position to, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I am trying to get to some results.
No, I'm confident we will be able to. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, sorry.